Welcome to the Abundant at the Top podcast. I'm Brittany Fox, your host.
I've been thinking about this a lot this week, and it's this idea of how do we see the darkest side of humanity and still live in a place of joy? How do we live a privileged life and not get bought down by guilt? By guilt of the people who don't have as much, by the guilt that we're not doing enough, that we're not contributing enough to society and to help with these really big issues that we see in the world. One thing that I've really been contemplating is how do we make systemic changes? And there's so many issues in the world, and where do you even begin when you haven't been in that space? I know for me, I've always had a heart to want to help people, to make an impact, to make a difference, but sometimes I get paralyzed by my own overwhelmedness, if you will, of the problems of what I'm seeing. And I think, how can I make a difference? What is this one little thing that I do going to make an impact? But recently, I started to volunteer at the dog shelter, as I mentioned, the Miami Dade Animal Services. There's over 600 animals in the shelter. It should really only hold about 300. And I've really seen some dark things of human cruelty, of what they're able to do and how they're able to numb themselves to be able to do something to an animal like what I've seen at the shelter. And some days I go there and I leave really sad. For example, I went there yesterday and I walk between, say, 5 and 7 dogs every time I go there, because you take them out for 15 minutes and then you put them back. And by the time you do that, it's about 2 hours. And I have about a 2-hour commitment that I give. And it's also, it really drains your energy because you go to this environment. It's very stressful. You have to be very present because it's a high stress environment. You got to keep the dog safe. And you also want to give this dog your attention when you're with it, because this is the only joy it might experience that day. So it does take a lot of energy as well. It was funny, before that, I got to the shelter and I was sending an audio text to two of my best friends, and I was saying how it just starts with one action, one decision to show up, one dog. And then I left. I'm like, oh, it's not enough. It's not enough, because you get assigned the most urgent rooms. And I went to one of the rooms and we had checked almost all the dogs in that room. And I'm like, yes, like we made a big impact. Then I go to the other room and it's already late. Not many volunteers are left. And there's a whole room of over 30 dogs that aren't going to get their walk today. And I just left really defeated, thinking it's not enough. What I'm doing isn't enough. What we do as a society isn't enough. But also, I know that this guilt and shame isn't going to move forward. So what is the answer? I don't know. This is what I'm here to discuss with you today and have you think about too, is how can we make an impact? How can we start change? I do know for sure it does start with one. It starts with one choice. It starts with one conversation. It starts with showing up in one room. It starts with connecting with one person who's hurting that day. To make a difference, it starts by one person showing up, and that person could be you. That person could be me. And while we see these dark sides of humanity, how do we still not get boggled down? I recently listened to this podcast. I forgot the guy's name, but he talked about, and he's starting this movement called ambitious morality, or moral ambition. And it really got me thinking, because I am very much a person who believes in America and all that it has to offer. And we are very much a capitalist society, which I love our ability to make money here. I love the ability to have the American dream. But I'm starting to really see the dark side of some of this capitalism, of when it impacts people, the planet, and animals, and there's no regulation around that. We're seeing the impact today. And I'm starting to feel that we need to be able to have some sort of regulations before this gets to get this better, before it gets even worse. But sometimes it has to get worse before it gets better. But I think about it, and what I started to do was some research, and I'm at the very beginning of this, so work through this with me, of what caused big changes. Think about Martin Luther King. Think about Nelson Mandela. Think about the British abolishment. What actually started those changes? And when you look at all of it, it comes back to what I said. It starts with one. But what was really interesting was that it starts with a small group, a small coalition of people who really care about a cause or a purpose or something that they want to change. And I think about my community and my friendships and the level of impact that my friends and influence that they have, and thinking about if we just came together around a specific cause to make an impact, that we could see massive change, that I already have this circle, I already have the ability. And then you have this small coalition, and then it's about organizing it to start to make the difference, to start advocating. Something that I found really interesting when doing some research about change is oftentimes the person who is advocating for the change, they don't ever see the full impact of what they did. That they don't see that all that they advocated for, all the pushback that they got, all the no's still worked for them, still made the change that they wanted, but they just didn't give up. That they were so motivated by the change that they just didn't stop. They kept going. And I thought that was a really interesting thing. And when I think about my community she created, one of the things that really is clear to me about what it is to help the loneliness epidemic, especially at the top. We all hear, oh, it's lonely at the top. I don't believe that. That's why this podcast is called Abundant at the Top. There's a lot of us on this mission, on this road that we've had success, but we're living an intentional life. We're living a conscious life. We're thinking about impact. We're thinking about what I'm talking about today is how can we make a difference? And I believe being in community is one of the greatest things that we could do of our time to be able to end the loneliness epidemic. And what does ending the loneliness epidemic look? For me, I love the idea of prevention. While we have issues that we need to step in and help, such as hunger and abuse and these animals in the shelter and humans too, there is a side before that. How could we prevent this? And it's not often as rewarding because we don't see what could have been. We don't feel that deep impact, that deep emotional pain of what happened. But being in community is actually a prevention. It's a prevention of the loneliness epidemic. And what does that prevent? I mean, when people aren't in community, when they're alone, when they're struggling, that's when people start abusing drugs, alcohol, it's when they make really poor choices in their relationships and even become suicidal. And being in community is the prevention for so many of these things. So, what I would encourage you today is to just think about the one. Think about the one action you can take today. Think about the one room you can show up in. Think about the one decision you can make to show up and be in community today.
That's it for this episode of Abundance at the Top. So make sure to subscribe to the podcast. This is just the beginning. Follow me on social, BE Foxy, Foxy, on Instagram, and check out the school community for all of the she creators out there doing magical things. Stay tuned.